In this video, I'm going to analyze the season finale of the show Unidentified, Inside America's UFO Investigation, Episode 6. Now, a lot of people are making a huge deal out of Episode 6, where a group of Italian researchers apparently came to the conclusion that a UFO in 2004 shot an electromagnetic beam at a helicopter's rotor and forced that helicopter to make an emergency landing. And these researchers also apparently came to the conclusion that 80 miles off the coast of northern Sicily, out in the open ocean, some anomalous source, perhaps under the water, was shooting electromagnetic beams into a small fishing village and causing mysterious fires there. But the thing about it is, if you watch Episode 6 clearly, Elizondo never conveys whether or not he buys in to the assessment that these Italian investigators are making. He's merely listening to what they have to say, and it really doesn't go beyond that. For this reason, I'm not really buying into the narrative that Episode 6 is fear-mongering. I don't think it's fear-mongering to simply listen to what investigators have to say and hear them out. Not only that, but in Episode 6, Elizondo states the following, referencing the alleged Italian UAP incidents. This was the first time that myself, even being an ATIP, was ever aware of an actual hostile act. Now, to put this in context, Elizondo joined ATIP in 2008. I think it might have been OSAP at that time. In 2010, he became the director of ATIP. In 2017, he resigned from ATIP. So he was with this organization for quite a long time. And during that duration, he was investigating UFO events. So if it was really true that To the Stars Academy was trying to sow a narrative that UFOs are hostile, I think the last thing they would want Elizondo to state was, hey guys, during my tenure, I never came across even one single incident where a UFO was hostile. As far as the validity of the UFO incident in which the helicopter was shot at, and the validity of the mysterious fires potentially coming from an anomalous source, I would say that neither of these have been debunked as some claim. On the other hand, I would also say that not enough evidence was given in Episode 6 to substantiate them either. That being said, I will give you an excerpt from an Italian news source that talks about the fires that occurred in the small fishing village and how it really isn't conclusive at all, according to this article, that these fires have been debunked as some claim. The local mayor remained unconvinced that a human being might well be behind the mysterious fires that have been plaguing his hamlet. I myself, along with law enforcement and national journalists, have seen objects burst into flames out of nowhere, said Mayor Calogero Beringhelli. Beginning in February 2004, items ranging from air conditioning units, fuse boxes, refrigerators and washing machines to microwave ovens and a car appear to have gone up in spontaneous combustion. One criticism that I will give to Episode 6 is that it seemed to create the illusion that Lou Elizondo and Tom DeLonge were meeting with current active duty government officials of Italy, when in actuality, at least according to my research, they were meeting with ex-military and I think ex-government officials as well. In fact, the narrator said the following in Episode 6. As the meeting winds down, Elizondo, DeLonge, and the Italian officials agree to form a global partnership. If their governments won't take the threat seriously, they'll work together outside the system. That said, during Episode 6, Luis Elizondo relayed the following. The last moment of the last hour of our engagement with the Italian government, we were afforded a thumb drive that has a tremendous amount of data on it about UAPs, and here particularly in Italy. So in one incident, the narrator paints a picture that they're not meeting with government officials, and in another incident during the episode, Elizondo states that they were meeting with the Italian government. Now, Elizondo may have misspoke, but nevertheless, that is one criticism I would give to this episode. During the meeting with Italian researchers, Elizondo was asked a fascinating question. Have you ever tried to contact those who are supposedly piloting these devices? To which Elizondo answered, I can't answer that question. Now, this got me thinking there is almost certainly super secret special access programs within the United States government that have been studying UFOs for decades. And if you doubt that, then I'm just going to say you're naive. I like how Brian Bender put it when he was talking with Alejandro Rojas recently. He said something to the effect of, if the Pentagon hasn't been studying UFOs for a long time, that would be akin to a malpractice. They sure damn well should have been and should be studying it now beyond ATIP, and I'm convinced that they are. But it got me thinking that there might be a program that's either dedicated or spends a lot of time, at least, trying to communicate with a phenomenon. Now, there's a couple reasons this would actually be a highly desired accomplishment by the national security apparatus. For one thing, there's always that possibility that if you could figure out a way to communicate with a phenomenon, you could elicit information from it on how the craft operate, and then you could have a better chance at duplicating that technology. You would also potentially want to figure out what the agenda is of this phenomenon, and one way to do that would be literally to communicate with it and literally ask, what is your agenda? For all we know, the United States government or pockets of it have figured out how to communicate with the phenomenon. Would it overly surprise me? No, it wouldn't. But this would be something that would be a priority for the United States government. I mean, how do you think the DIA would feel with the proposition that the Chinese or the Russians were allying with this very real non-human technology, and this non-human technology, or whoever's behind it, is giving the Russians or the Chinese information on how this technology works and leaving the United States in the dust? That would be something that I would say would be pretty huge deal for the Defense Intelligence Agency. I want to share an exchange between Chris Mellon and Harry Reid that underscores a truly frustrating aspect to the ongoing disclosure process that's occurring right now. Mellon says, "One of the things that is very frustrating to me as a former Defense Department official myself is it's not even being examined, UFO gun camera footage. It's sitting on computer servers." Reid responds, "You know why they are not looking at it? They don't want to. It's another issue that they're trying to ignore. And that's what happened over the years. And that's too bad. We now have the technology. What else is going on in space? That information is coming in. It's all stored someplace on a computer bank, and it can be pulled up." Mellon responds, "We're in an environment right now where there is a sort of unprecedented distrust of our government. Do you have any reason to believe that there is a government cover-up of UFOs, that behind the scenes the government actually really does know the answer and has a..." Reid interrupts. "I think the government doesn't know the answers, but over the decades, rather than try to find the answers, they try to cover up what the answers might be." To what extent does Harry Reid and Chris Mellon take the implications of that conversation seriously? After all, in 2009, Harry Reid sent a letter to Deputy Secretary of Defense William Lynn requesting that ATIP gets a special access program status. Now, it was ultimately rejected. But the reason, or at least one of the reasons, that Harry Reid wanted ATIP to become a special access program was so that the ATIP program would have access to more data, to more evidence. Now, where would that extra data and evidence come from? It would come from other special access programs studying UFOs. So Harry Reid was knowledgeable to know that ATIP was not the only show in town, and there were other UFO programs, much more well-funded programs with much more evidence studying UFOs. So why then, within Unidentified, does Harry Reid give the impression that the United States government is not taking UFOs seriously, when Harry Reid himself has an understanding that there are special access programs outside of ATIP within the United States government that are taking the phenomenon seriously? And Chris Mellon has this understanding as well. Luis Elizondo has this understanding as well. I mean, I can't prove that he does, but I believe that he does. So what's going on here? I think what's going on here is that basically they're talking within the framework of, yes, there are special access programs. No, it doesn't matter. And does it matter? I mean, if these special access programs are not sharing data in a useful way with Congress, with the sitting president of the United States, with the military, or anybody else, they might as well not exist. I mean, let's put this in context. Luis Elizondo, former head of ATIP, one of the reasons he resigned from working in the U.S. government is because while he was the director of ATIP, he couldn't get data on the UFO phenomenon up the chain of command to the then Secretary of Defense, James Mattis. Now, if Luis Elizondo, working for an organization that wasn't even a special access program, couldn't get information up to the Secretary of Defense, you can only imagine how insulated the special access programs are. It's mind-boggling, frankly. And it's an abomination. And so what is Harry Reid and Chris Mellon supposed to do when they talk about this issue? Are they supposed to say, we don't have to worry. The U.S. government's studying UFOs. There's multiple special access programs that are well funded and they're taking it seriously. So let's just close up shop and stop talking about this phenomenon. We don't need to. It's all being taken care of. But they know that's not really how it works. Yes, those special access programs take it seriously, but how useful are they when they don't tell anybody, when they don't share data with anybody else and they stay in their little dark caves amongst themselves? They might as well not exist. They're not helping the United States. They're not. Not the way they should be. Not the way they should be. And so I think by not emphasizing the fact that, yes, there are other programs within the government studying UFOs, it forces the hand of Congress, it forces the hand of the president, it forces the hand of many members of the United States government to start looking into this. And in a roundabout way, I think it will ultimately force the hand of the special access programs to start sharing data the way they should have been from day one. So this is why I think when Chris Mellon or Harry Reid talk about this, they're not going to talk about special access programs, because part of their objective is to get the special access programs that are already existing to come into the light. And perhaps the best way to do that is to talk about the UFO subject in a particularly strategic way. I mean, if you were to talk about the UFO subject and underscore that there are programs within the government studying UFOs and it's being taken care of, that gives the illusion that there's no crisis. But in fact, there is a crisis, and this crisis has been going on for decades. I'll give you sort of a analogy. Consider there is a tribe in the Amazon who has never been officially contacted by the white man, okay? And they've been studied by the white man for decades, covertly. And members of that tribe would sometimes say, you know, I saw something off in the distance. I swear it was humanoid and it was pale. What is that? And then they go to the senior tribesmen, and the senior tribesmen say, no, what you saw was an albino deer in the distance. You see, when you see an albino deer in the distance, sometimes it can resemble a humanoid, and what you're really seeing is an albino deer and not a humanoid. Or how about in other occasions, some of the tribesmen will hear and see something that looks like a giant bird. And when that giant bird passes over, they'll hear a very loud noise. It happens very seldomly, but they'll see it. So when this happens, they'll go to the senior tribesmen and they'll be like, oh my God, I saw a giant bird and it made this thunderous noise. But you know what the senior tribesmen will say? Oh, no. What you saw was a flock of birds flying in formation that made it look like a giant bird. And what you heard is there's this condition that sometimes arises miraculously where your hearing gets really, really, really acute. You can hear really, really well. And you're hearing waterfalls off in the distance that simultaneously while you see these big flock of birds that resemble a giant bird. And let's say this went on for decades and decades and decades and decades amongst the tribes people. Would that be fair? Would that be good? Would that be healthy? That would be a crisis. Because even though the white man never did anything negative to the tribes people, and those planes, well, not to them, those big giant birds never did anything hostile, doesn't mean that that won't someday change. Doesn't mean that the people that make up the tribe have a right to know what the hell is going on. But of course, the senior tribes people, they know. They know it's the white man. And they know that those are vehicles. Those are not flocks of birds that look like a giant bird, but they're deceiving the tribes because they don't want the people within the tribe to contend with the reality of their universe. That is a crisis. And you would think it was a crisis if you were part of that tribe. Just as I think it's a crisis that my own government lies to me and lies to the American people and gives the impression that this phenomenon doesn't exist and they don't have smoking guns when they have hundreds of smoking guns. Can I prove it? Nope, but I believe it. Luis Elizondo recently said that he believes that the United States government has debris from UFOs. Really? Well, do they have an intact, complete saucer? I sure hope they don't. I genuinely hope they don't. Well, actually, I don't genuinely hope they don't, but I kind of hope they don't, because that kind of lie to your countrymen, oh man, that is the there's no word that could ever describe the level of lie that is, and that's a crisis. We are in a crisis right now. And so what good is it going to be if you have a conversation and you talk about how there's programs studying UFOs when it has no impact on civilization? Civilization has a right to know, a right to discuss it, a right to understand it, and a right to be part of the conversation of how to move forward with this knowledge. On July 12th, Tom DeLonge did a tweet storm formulating some ideas on how to solve the current crisis that we find ourselves in, and quite frankly, our civilization has been in for a long time. And of course, Tom DeLonge subsequently deleted these tweets, but thankfully, Danny Silva of silvarecord.com collated them, and that's where I got the following tweets. Storming Area 51 won't do anything of any value. The secrecy is a bureaucratic issue, a corporate issue, not an us versus them issue. We need legislation to be signed that changes the way this particular subject is classified. They are operating without oversight. And that's wrong. The way special access programs work really do help our country, but over 70 years the system allowed this subject to sink into an invisible hole. Look how Trump keeps trying things and gets shot down by judges or Congress or the system in general. Not even the president can do what he wants. If there is an existing law, the only thing that can change it is another law. So we need Congress to change the law on this one and pry open any existing information, technology, and biological treasures so that the world can learn, and also have it managed by elected leadership. Over time, a group of the self-labeled, most educated, most elite, and most benevolent have owned this in what they considered our best interest. And I believe in the 1940s they were right. But times change, and now there is major distrust of the government and major ignorance on the part of us civilians on how national security works. Thus, the reason I am making Secret Machines feature films to bring everyone up to speed at To the Stars Academy has spent the last year and a half briefing the Senate, multiple committees, and Congress, and helping glue the DoD, intelligence community, and Congress together on this. And guess what? Yes, we are getting close to organizing this issue in the appropriate way. The Senate is energized and probably losing sleep the way I was when I was brought into all this. It's a big deal, and I'm super proud of To the Stars Academy and how it succeeded in influencing national security law. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop where I sell t-shirts. Link is in the description below. Or you could even become a patron. Or you can just slap a like on this bad boy and I'll appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.